So I finally got to watch Stallone's director's cut of his 80s classic Rocky IV. Is there anything different? Well, yes, quite a lot actually. Thankfully, what originally ended up on the cutting room floor has been restored to this cut, and a good few scenes are now gone completely, with others trimmed, extended and re-edited, so we now see them from different angles, which works really well, especially in the fight scenes. So without further ado, let's take a look. But please be warned, whether you've never seen the original or the director's cut yet, there's major spoilers ahead. The original cut of Rocky IV started with a theme from Rocky III, Eye of the Tiger, the gloves exploding, the final minute or so of the Clubber Lang fight, and Apollo's favour, the private fight between him and Rocky. Stallone's new cut removes all that, and this version starts with 7 minutes of footage from Rocky III, mainly Rocky losing to Clubber Lang, being approached by Apollo Creed in mixed gym, and the final round where Rocky regains the title. There are two noticeable differences here. The first is the sound of the punches. No longer are they sledgehammers hitting brick walls. It's toned down a lot to make it sound more realistic. And secondly, the use of the song The Sweetest Victory at the end of the fight. That song was on the Rocky IV soundtrack but was never in the film. It was supposed to have been used at the end of the Drago fight, but it was cut. Likewise, Peter Cetera also wrote the song The Glory of Love for Rocky IV, but it wasn't used either. Instead, it was used for The Karate Kid Part 2. The screen then fades to black and the familiar Rocky title has been restored, scrolling across the screen. Interestingly though, with no music. Perhaps the silence is a forewarning of what's to come. The film opens not with Rocky returning home and celebrating Paulie's birthday, that too is gone completely, including the robot, but with the scene of Apollo playing with his dogs in the pool, watching the press conference of Drago arriving in the US. This scene is extended with Michael Pataki having an extra couple of lines, when he says they haven't heard anything back from the Balboa camp. In the original, Apollo rings Rocky while Rocky is washing his car talking to Robert, but because the robot appeared in that scene, that's now gone too, though it's replaced with a far better scene and a massive addition to the film. We see Apollo and Rocky outside Rocky's house talking about the exhibition with the Russian, and Rocky is completely indifferent to the idea. It also further cements the friendship between the two of them, which of course makes what's coming even harder for the viewer. The press conference with Drago is actually shorter. Some of Michael Pataki's dialogue is cut here, for instance when he's explaining about the average punch power of a boxer. Another big addition next, with an extended scene of Apollo talking to Rocky, Adrian and Paulie. Adrian has a couple of extra lines, but in the original she gets up and leaves the table. Here, Rocky follows her into the kitchen where she continues to tell him of her concerns about Apollo fighting. Not a great scene to be honest, as it ends on a very silly note with Adrian pretending to punch the bread Rocky is holding. But there is a great line in it as she says to Rocky, "This won't happen if you don't back it." I thought that was brilliant, as it shows again how Rocky could have avoided the tragedy. The exhibition conference is re-edited almost as if it was from the point of view of the reporters. In the original scene it was mainly close-ups, but here we see a lot of the scene from the back of the room. Once again, Michael Pataki has additional lines and Drago speaks. Some of the dialogue has been changed too. For example, in the original, Rocky suggests the first thing Apollo needs to do is get a ladder. Now he says, a very big ladder. There's also some nice banter between Rocky and Apollo, where Rocky says he can never get a word in edgeways. Because of the re-editing, I think the scene feels way more serious than it did originally. Even the smiles from Adrian and Mary Ann, Apollo's wife, are cut when Apollo says the man's tongue didn't come through customs. My favourite line is cut though, where Apollo says that he's retired more men than Social Security. We then go to Vegas, where surprisingly the entire scene with Rocky and Apollo in the dressing room is cut. It goes straight to Drago in the ring being elevated to the auditorium with James Brown performing Living in America. In the ring, the scene where the announcer introduces Rocky is cut. Where Apollo hits Drago's gloves and his arms don't budge is gone too. There's less dialogue and less focus on Stallone as well. To be honest, there is some bad editing cues here. For example, certain dialogue from Duke is left in, but the scene is trimmed, so what he's saying doesn't make sense anymore. Though I have seen this film countless of times, and for the general viewer it may not even be noticed. Stallone also fixed the gaffe from the original version, where Apollo isn't wearing his gloves when he's taunting Drago. The best addition to the fight though is we see Apollo actually put up a fight and lands many punches. This was fantastic, and I believe Stallone always regretted editing it the way he did originally. While filming the exhibition fight, Dolph Lundgren threw Carl Weathers quite aggressively against the ropes, resulting in Weathers walking off the set and threatening to quit the film. Production was shut down for 4 days, while Stallone acted as an intermediary to help them reconcile their differences. There's better dialogue too in between rounds with Rocky and Apollo, and the throw in the towel scene is shortened, and it's much better for it. Drago also gets very clunky additional dialogue before he says, "If he dies, he dies." Another great addition is, as Apollo is falling to the canvas, you hear Mary Ann calling his name and see her running to the ring. That was really well done. At Apollo's funeral, Duke gives a wonderful speech, and Rocky's speech is an alternate one, and much better. Afterwards, Rocky admits to Adrian that it was his fault, while she consoles him and assures him it wasn't. It then goes to the Boxing Commission, which we only saw as a newspaper headline in the original. Now the full scene is restored, with Rocky trying to get a fight officially sanctioned between him and Drago, to which the Commission denies. The press conference is again different, with Michael Pataki getting a few more lines of dialogue and Drago being a little more humanised. He tries to talk, but keeps getting stopped by Pataki's character, Koloff. That was a nice touch, and the way he looks at Rocky as he leaves the conference, I could be reading too much into it, but it looked like he almost wanted to say sorry for killing Creed. The stairway scene with Rocky and Adrian is slightly extended, with different camera angles, and where Rocky tells her to win he's going to have to kill me is cut. When Rocky leaves the house, the camera stays on Adrian as she's crying. It then goes into the montage of No Easy Way Out, the main difference being the flashback scenes are black and white and there are fewer close-ups of Rocky in the car. As the robot is completely gone, the next scene with Paulie is cut and it goes straight to Rocky talking to Robert. Some of Robert's dialogue is cut here too, favouring Rocky's monologue instead, and it's an alternate monologue. In this cut, Rocky tells Robert that he needs to make his own decisions in life no matter what others think, which plays really well when you think of what Rocky says to him years later in Rocky Balboa. Another good addition to the new version is next, where we see Adrian again begging him not to go, and Rocky delivers the line from Rocky 2. "I never asked you to stop being a woman, don't ask me to stop being a man." He walks away from her saying, "It'll be alright." It then goes to Russia and the plane arriving with Survivor's Burning Heart playing, but there's a brilliant extended scene here. When Paulie comes out of the plane he says, like he did in the original, "This is Russia, doesn't look so tough, Rocky." But in this cut, Rocky asks, "What are you doing with Adrian's earmuffs?" And Paulie replies, "They look better on me." When the KGB guy asks them to get in the car, the scene where Paulie said the weather is detrimental to his sinuses is cut. And when they arrive at the cabin, Ghost Boy is still there. The scene here is extended too, as Duke asks the KGB about sparring partners, and he's told there is no sparring partners. Which now makes total sense, because in the original version, out of nowhere, Paulie says, "No sparring," to which Rocky replies, "I don't think I need it, Paulie." Now with the added scene of Duke's question, it makes sense. Interestingly, as the KGB drive away, originally the shot was from the chained wheel of the car up to Rocky. In this cut, it's the Soviet flag on the bonnet. Also, Paulie falling in the snow is extended, as he says, "It's a good place to die." You can see Burt Young clearly smiling as he gets up from the snow, though his dialogue of his comics and depressing vacation is cut. In the cabin, instead of the Chipmunk song, it's now the beautiful Philadelphia Morning from the original Rocky soundtrack by Bill Conti, which plays out so much better. After Duke wins the chess game, which is trimmed so for whatever reason you don't see the Russian knocked to pieces on the board, Rocky is in his room, and this time you see him put the photo of Adrian up in the mirror. And the cut monologue to Adrian on the stairs is restored here, and you hear Rocky now saying, "To beat me, he's going to have to kill me." Duke then delivers his motivational speech to Rocky, and unfortunately, that line of dialogue is still there, when Duke says, "I know you're going to have to do most of this on your own." I never understood that. How could he be doing it on his own when Duke, Paulie, and later Adrian were at his side the entire time? His love, his strength, his motivation stand with him from start to finish. He couldn't be further from on his own, both psychologically and physically. Anyway, the first training montage is almost the same, but for a few different scenes. For example, we see more of Rocky pulling the cart that Paulie is sitting on. When Rocky falls with the tree trunk on his back, he now picks it up and keeps walking through the snow with it on his shoulder. His pull-ups show more of Paulie, and there's a great addition of Rocky hitting a punch bag. The second training montage is edited a little different, and we get an additional skip rope sequence. In the first press conference earlier in the film, the reference to steroids was cut, where Brigitte Nielsen says Ivan is naturally trained. In the training montage, however, you do see him being injected. Actually, most of Brigitte Nielsen's scenes are cut. I wonder why. On to the fight, and in Rocky's dressing room it's almost the same, but again just different angles. You do see Paulie walking around with the flag draped over his shoulders, but just not in the same sequence. And while Rocky is praying, this time you hear his speech to Apollo about it's only an exhibition and it doesn't mean anything, and we see the cutscene from earlier in Apollo's dressing room where Apollo tells him he will understand when it's over. Walking to the ring while Paulie delivers the same speech, it's angled differently, and now you see Adrian smiling at him, which I thought was lovely. Before Rocky steps in the ring, he kisses Adrian. There's also more commentary such as the power of Drago is virtually a biochemical product, and the man is stronger and a foot taller than Balboa. Drago's entrance is again edited differently. He looks more foreboding, if that's possible. The first round sees much tighter editing with more punches coming from Rocky. Some scenes are removed too, like where Drago is taunting Rocky to hit him. I like that it was removed, as the first round now feels that Rocky actually has a chance and it's more balanced. Also this time, when Rocky goes down, we hear his inner monologue telling him to breathe, don't be scared, and to get up. I may be wrong, but it does sound like Stallone newly recorded that piece, as his voice does sound older. The first round also has extra shots of Adrian and Paulie, and Koloff smugly smiling. The scene where Rocky says, "I see 3 of them out there," is shortened too. When Paulie replies, "Hit the one in the middle," Duke doesn't say it this time. In the original he did. Into round 2, and the most noticeable change is Drago doesn't pick Rocky up and throw him, and again Rocky lands way more punches. The round does still end with Rocky and Drago wrestling on the canvas. At no point either in this new cut do we see Robert watching the fight on television, as they all included the robot. In between rounds, Drago gets an extra line when he asks how bad his eye is cut, and the scene with Duke telling Rocky no pain is now gone. The montage plays out almost the same, again different angles, Rocky landing more punches, and different shots of Adrian in the crowd. Before the final round, there's a few changes. Duke shaking the wet towel at the Russian coach is gone. Rocky no longer asks Duke what round it is. The scene with Drago throwing Koloff away is slightly extended, but the main addition is the referee coming over to Rocky and Duke telling him he's going to stop the fight. Rocky says he didn't come here to end this fight sitting down, and Duke turns to the referee saying, "Go talk to him," pointing to Drago. During the filming of the final fight scene, Dolph Lundgren punched Stallone so hard in the stomach that it sent his diaphragm up against his heart. Production on the film was temporarily shut down while Stallone was flown back to Los Angeles for treatment. Just at the start of the final round, where Drago says, "To the end," Rocky now replies, "Yeah." The round is pretty much the same, again different angles, and the final moments of the fight look much better as we see it from the opposite side of the ring. The celebration is different as well, and there's a nice scene of Paulie smiling. But Rocky's victory speech at the end is completely different. He talks about Apollo dying, and his delivery of "everybody can change" is way better here. And instead of Hearts on Fire playing out the film, in this new cut it's back to Eye of the Tiger. But another massive change is, in the original, after Rocky gives a speech, the Russian Premier and Politburo stand and applaud him. In this version, they just walk out in disgust, while Koloff has a look on his face as if he knows he's on the next train to Siberia. It goes back to the ring, and instead of Rocky just jumping in the air and the screen pausing, here we see him going over to Drago and they touch gloves. Rocky leaves the ring with Adrian and it ends. A fantastic ending. All in all, I really enjoyed this version. It certainly gives the film more gravitas, as a lot of the cheese, namely the robot, and a lot of the pop songs are gone, and it feels more like a Rocky film and certainly ties in with Creed 2 better. The main thing, the most important thing here though, is the essence of the film. All the emotionally charged experience and excitement is still intact. The Rocky saga is about the human spirit. Each film illustrates that the road to victory isn't without cost or sacrifice, but the character always finds the strength to continue. The films make the audience feel good. It makes everyone feel they have a shot at whatever they want to do. And that's the very essence of Rocky. Thanks for watching. I'm off to rewatch the director's cut again. Until the next time, hailing frequencies closed. If you liked what you saw, please hit the like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell too. Thank you.